It was just last Friday night at 6 o'clock. We shared the story of Karen Walensky, who survived the plane actually hitting her home, but lost her husband in that crash. And tonight, we have another unique perspective of the events of February 12, 2009.
2 on Your Side's Dave McKinley sits down with Congressman Chris Collins about being at the crash site that night, a situation that arose that he has never discussed before, and how he's continuing to defend pilot regulations put in place as a result.
There are certain events in life that never leave you, and this was certainly one in my case.
And 10 years later,
34-7 approach.
you can still hear the urgency in an air traffic controller's voice.
Hogan 34-7 approach.
That something was dreadfully wrong.
You need to talk to somebody at least 5 miles northeast, okay, possibly Clarence, that area right in there, Akron area, either state police or sheriff's department need to find out if anything is on the ground.
Greg Skapitsky, my commissioner of emergency services, was on the phone with me.
Chris Collins was the county executive and sped to the crash scene less than 2 miles from his home.
It was surreal. I mean, you can't prepare for this. I mean, it's a scene out of a movie, but it's real, and you could just see the flames just. It was obvious there were no survivors. I had a call from the head of the ECMC emergency department. They were calling in their physicians, and I had to tell him there won't be any ambulances heading to ECMC. So then it was just a matter of trying to coordinate a certain level of chaos and who was doing what, and that's when the bureaucracy entered.
A decade later, he recalls his frustration over being told not to communicate what he knew to the loved ones of those on the doomed flight.
Okay, easy now, easy.
By 1 a.m., they still would not release information on the flight. And you can imagine the desperation of the families who, in the pit of their stomach, know what happened. And I'd been county executive all of a year. I finally looked around and I said, it's time for us to make an announcement. We know it's Flight 3407. It's time to let these families know, and there are certainly no survivors. And again, I was shut down on that.
By whom?
By the NFTA. And I finally looked at him and I said, you know what? I don't work for you. Right now there are. And so I went to the cameras, and I was the one who did acknowledge to the press and to the families it was Flight 3407. It did originate in Newark, and there were no survivors.
Collins was unsuccessful in his bid to be re-elected as county executive, but Flight 3407 followed him to Congress, where he still finds himself dealing with efforts to undo measures to increase pilot training and flight safety passed before he got there.
It's been an ongoing battle. It's one of the few situations where Senator Schumer and I are in agreement that we cannot reduce these hours. The attempt to roll back some of these changes has been ongoing by the regional airlines. Also, God bless the families. They have never relented in coming to, as a group, to Washington to make sure that the passage of time would not dilute their efforts in memory of their lost loved ones to keep the skies safe. Can't help but leave an impression on members of Congress.
But as recently as last summer, Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, while discussing a pilot shortage, hinted the training requirements might be partly to blame.
We were disappointed that Secretary Chao, while they have not been rolled back, she clearly was using words that were concerning. I caught her on the phone and I talked to her about it, and we sent her a letter, and the letter was co-signed by a lot of individuals. They have not been rolled back, but it's a battle we have to continue.
10 years later, the nation is led by a president who campaigned for and has practiced a pattern of deregulation, and Chao is a member of his cabinet.
Do you worry that President Trump would support a rollback or deregulation of the measures that were passed in the wake of 3407?
No, I have no concerns there.
What makes you so sure, though? He is the deregulation president, after all.
I'll continue to fight that tooth and nail, and I'm confident Senator Schumer will as well.
We also put that question to Senator Schumer today, who agreed that the regulations put in place after the crash of Flight 3407 are still under threat.
although he pointed to the airline industry and its lobbyists as the source of that threat rather than the president. Dave McKinley, Channel 2 News.
Thank you, Dave. You know, all that legislation may not be there today if it wasn't for the families sticking together in those red outfits. Thank God for those surviving families to stay together and coalesce and get things done in government.
I think there's no question it's in large part due to all their effort, and their work, sadly, is never going to be done.
Right.
I think it's something that for the rest of their lives and their children are going to have to continue. And we all benefit, thankfully, that they have channeled their grief and done something pretty selflessly, because they've lost the biggest gift they could possibly have in their loved ones.
Yeah.